Whoa, easy there. Easy there, Ethel. Don't put that there. Hey. Oh, excuse me. How the heck are you? Oh. Serious time. Hey, I'm the Beer Whisperer. I'm not always as drunk as I appear to be. Sometimes I feel like I'm inhabited by the ghost of Foster Brooks. Oh, Winterhook, ESB, ta-da! 6%, 45 IBUs. I've said in a couple different videos talking about other beers that I just realized, or I just found out a couple months ago that they were partially owned by AB InBev, and that kind of sucks. Uh, and I actually have done a couple videos on this beer, so I want to talk more about Redhook as a brewery more so than this beer because I do like this beer. It's tasty. Most of these beers can be found in my area fairly reasonable, and that's probably because they are partially owned by the evil empire. Because it's probably why they're a little bit cheaper than others. Craft beers have really got up in price over the last couple of years. There's very few that I can get here for under $10 a six pack. I'm looking at 9, 10, and up uh, for the really good stuff. And some like Rogue. I mean, I do I like Rogue. I think they're okay. I like the Yellow Snow IPA, but it runs in my area for $13 a six pack. Is it worth it? Well, that's up to you to decide. But I can buy others here for less than that I like as well, if not better. I like the Mother's Little Helper that generally somebody has on sale for about $8, and many times I can find it for $7 a six pack. It usually goes at regular price at $9 a six pack. I like it as well, if not better, for my palate. But there's others out there, other Sierra Nevada Torpedo I can usually get for $9, $10 a six pack that I like as well, if not better than Rogue Yellow Snow. So sometimes it becomes about price. The Longhammer IPA, I don't think it's a terrible IPA. I don't think it's in that same league. So that's kind of a different animals, kind of apples and oranges. In 1987, I moved from Southern California to Washington State. Now, I got to admit, at the time, I was a young kid who was more interested in getting drunk than quality beer. What can I say? I have to admit that. But I've always had a taste bud for bigger beer. I remember drinking an Anchor Steam or a Guinness when I was 21 years old, thinking, wow, when all my friends and family would taste those beers, they wouldn't get the same flavors as I was getting. So somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew I was destined for better things. But I still drank that macro, get me drunk quick stuff for a long time. When I moved to Washington State, that was my first experience with Redhook. And of course, I think the first beer I tried was their ESB, which is kind of their flagship beer. But at the time, they also had one of their big beers, which they quit making shortly thereafter, was just simply called Redhook Rye. Back in '87, beers didn't have the clever names that they have today. They were just called what they were. And this was just a rye ale. It wasn't. It seems like everybody that uses rye malt these days has to turn it into an IPA. This wasn't that. It was just a rye ale. Now, if I was to taste that exact same beer today, would I feel the same way about it? I don't know because my palate was much different. I mean, you have to remember this was '87. I was 22 years old and I was used to drinking mostly American watered down macro stuff. So you have to think about what a rye malt would do to a kid's palate back then. And I remember just loving that beer because I remember telling people back then, even before I knew anything about beer, was that it had these wonderful spicy notes about it. There was just something different that I really loved about that Redhook Rye. And every time, I remember it costing a little more than regular beer at the time. I remember every time I could afford it, I would buy a six pack to take it home, or I would order it out at whatever bar I was in at the time. because I just love that beer. I think it was late '87 or '88 or somewhere around there. They quit making it, but oh my gosh, I just thought that was the greatest beer. But at that time maybe rye malt, you know, maybe it was like the redheaded stepchild, back then. I wish they would resurrect that exact recipe. Not try to make a rye IPA like everybody else, but resurrect that exact recipe. I bet that beer would sell because it was phenomenal. I've talked several times about St. Louis small neighborhood brewery Civilife, where I had just a rye ale, similar, only 4.5%, but with beautiful flavor, spicy notes. It was just a great session ale. Now I don't know what the ABV or the numbers were on that original Redhook brew, uh, but it was great. I think too much is made sometimes about a beer that has to knock your socks off. Sometimes it just needs to make you feel good and have a memory about it. And I think if if Redhook, in their infinite wisdom, decided to resurrect that brew, I think it'd be a winner. I mean, I'm not taking about. I'm not. I'm not talking about coming up with a brand new recipe. I want them to resurrect that exact same recipe. Don't come up with a rye IPA. Do that rye just like you did it. Redhook rye. Do it just like you did it back in the '80s, man. And I think people are going to gravitate. People like me. There's got to be others that want it just for nostalgia, but there is a market for a rye ale, and not just a rye PA. There is a market for just a rye ale, and it'll work, man. Listen to me, Red Hook. I know which I I know which of I speak, man. Ah. Anyway, kind of went a long way around the barn for that. But hey, Red Hook, pay attention, damn it! I'm jumping beer whisper. Woo.